There is a question nobody thinks to ask about The Simpsons. Not which episode is the best, not which season went wrong, not whether the show should have ended 15 years ago. Those conversations happen constantly. The question nobody asks is simpler and stranger than any of those. Why is your favorite character your favorite? Not who, why? Because the character a person keeps coming back to across 35 years of television is not a random choice. Something in that specific person, their specific wound, their specific way of moving through the world, their specific way of dealing with life, landed somewhere real in the viewer, somewhere that went deeper than funny. Springfield is not just a cartoon town, it is a mirror, and the character standing closest to the glass when a person looks in has been trying to tell them something about themselves for a very long time. Welcome to Yellow Fan. Let's get started. The Mirror in Springfield. The Simpsons has been on television since 1989. Over 35 years it has introduced hundreds of characters, told thousands of stories, and been watched by generations of people who grew up with it playing in the background of their childhoods. Most people have a favorite character. Most people have had that favorite for a long time. Most people have never asked why. The why is more interesting than the who. Psychology classrooms around the world, real ones at real universities, have been using The Simpsons to teach students about how the human mind works. Not because the show is educational in an obvious way, but because the characters are built so precisely around real human patterns that they function as textbook examples. Homer has been used to explain Sigmund Freud's theory of the id, the part of the mind that chases pleasure and avoids pain without thinking about consequences. Marge has been used to explain the ego, the part that tries to manage reality. Ned Flanders has been used to explain the superego, the internal rulebook that tells you what you should and should not do. These are not fan theories. They are published academic arguments, including a full thesis from the University of Iceland. The show did this without trying to. The writers were not reading Freud and building characters around his framework. They were writing funny people, and those people happened to be psychologically real enough that Freud's framework fit them like a glove. That is the sign of a piece of fiction that has been doing something serious underneath the jokes. The argument here is a specific one. The character a person gravitates toward, the one they call their favorite, the one they defend in conversations about the show, the one whose scenes they remember most clearly, is almost never chosen at random. Something about that character's specific way of moving through the world, their specific pain, their specific way of dealing with life, landed with that person in a way that went deeper than entertainment. The question is what that landing means. This is not about whether the viewer is exactly like their favorite character. Most Homer fans are not as impulsive as Homer. Most Lisa fans do not have an IQ of 159. The connection runs differently. It runs through recognition, the feeling of seeing something on screen that reflects a real internal experience back at the viewer, often before the viewer has fully found the words for that experience themselves. The Simpsons has always worked this way. It is one of the reasons the show has lasted as long as it has. Other animated shows from the same era came and went. The Simpsons became a permanent part of the cultural furniture because its characters are not just funny, they are true. Homer's inability to resist immediate gratification is funny, but it is also something that a significant portion of the audience understands from the inside. Marge's anxiety and suppressed exhaustion is played for comedy, but it is also something that a significant portion of the audience has lived with. Moe's loneliness is a running joke, but it is also one of the most honest portrayals of chronic isolation in the history of American television. None of these characters are purely one thing. That is the key to why they work. Homer is not just a lazy idiot. He is a man who loves his family with a fierceness that occasionally surprises even the writers. He has held down the same job for 35 years. He has, in his own chaotic way, shown up. The id reading is accurate, but it is not complete. The complete reading includes the fact that Homer's recklessness comes with genuine warmth, and that the audience has always felt that warmth, even on the episodes where he does something genuinely indefensible. Marge is not just a worrying housewife. She is a person who has built her entire life around other people's needs, and has become so practiced at this that she has lost track of her own. When the show gives her an episode that is entirely about her fear of flying, her anxiety, her suppressed anger, the audience often finds those episodes more affecting than the broad comedy ones. Because the truth of Marge is that she is holding more than anyone around her acknowledges. And most people watching know someone like that. Many people watching are someone like that. Lisa is not just the smart one. She is a child who is profoundly lonely in her own home, surrounded by people who love her, but cannot meet her where she is. Her IQ of 159 is part of her story, but it is not the part that makes people love her. The part that makes people love her is the gap, the space between how much she can see and understand and how little the world around her seems to notice or care. That gap is not a fictional invention. Research into real gifted children has found that the loneliness Lisa experiences is one of the most common and least discussed features of being intellectually advanced in a world not built for it. Ned Flanders is not just the annoying religious neighbor. He is a man who, as a child, had no rules, no structure, and no guidance, and reacted by building the most rigid internal rulebook imaginable. The diddly-doos and doodly-doos, the nonsense sounds he makes when he is close to losing his temper, those are not verbal tics. They are a coping mechanism. They are what happens when someone has been trained, deeply and early, not to express anger under any circumstances, and anger keeps building anyway. The episode Hurricane Nettie from Season 8 makes this explicit. When everything Ned has finally breaks down around him, when his house is destroyed and the town rebuilds it badly as a joke, the repressed rage comes out, and it comes out with a precision and a heat that shocks even him. Moe is not just the prank call victim behind the bar. He is one of the show's most sustained explorations of what chronic unhappiness actually looks like. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, ongoing kind that does not resolve. The kind where a person knows, somewhere, that things could be different, but cannot find the door out of the pattern they are in. Mr. Burns is not just the villain. He is a man so wealthy and powerful that he has outlived every normal human connection, and who is, underneath the theatrics, profoundly, completely alone. The episode where he searches the world for his childhood teddy bear, Bobo, is not played as a villain episode. It is played as a portrait of someone who, at enormous age, still has one small thing from before the money and the power, and cannot let it go. Krusty the Clown is not just a washed-up showbiz joke. He is a man who chose his dream over his relationship with his father, and has been paying for that choice ever since. His manic depression, his addictions, his inability to care about the one fan who has done the most for him, all of it traces back to a gap created the night his father saw him in clown makeup and walked away. His entire performing career has been, in some way, a performance for an audience of one who stopped watching. Comic Book Guy is not just the pompous critic. He has a master's degree from Harvard. He grew up in isolation, using comics as an escape from a childhood marked by neglect. His knowledge is not arrogance, it is armor. The contempt he projects onto everyone around him is the long shadow of a child who learned early that the world did not particularly care whether he was there. Principal Skinner is not just the rule-following administrator. He is a man whose real name is not even Seymour Skinner. He borrowed an identity from a man who went missing in Vietnam and has been living inside it ever since. He lives with his mother. He has given his entire adult life to an institution that barely respects him. The tragedy of Skinner is not that he is boring. It is that he is trapped, and he knows it, and he stays anyway. 10 characters, 10 specific psychological portraits, each one precise enough that real academic analysis has been written about them. Each one built around a real wound, a real pattern, a real way of moving through a world that does not always cooperate. And each one has a different kind of viewer who calls them their favorite. The rest of this series is about what those viewers have in common with the characters they love, not on the surface, but underneath. The places where the recognition lives. The reasons a cartoon character can make a grown adult go quiet in the middle of something they were watching just to laugh. It starts with the most watched, most studied, most analyzed character in the history of the show. A man who, on paper, should not work at all. Too impulsive, too selfish, too oblivious, too loud. And yet, somehow, he has been the face of this franchise for 35 years. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The people who love Homer Simpson most are not the ones who want to be him. They are the ones who understand, at a level they cannot always articulate, exactly why he is the way he is. What that understanding reveals about them is more interesting than the character himself. Section 2. Homer Simpson, the man who gets away with it. Homer J. Simpson works at the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant as a safety inspector. He has held this job for over 30 years. In that time, he has caused multiple nuclear meltdowns, fallen asleep at his safety console so often that Mr. Burns has stopped bothering to reprimand him, and once prevented a catastrophe entirely by accident while reaching for a donut. He weighs somewhere around 239 pounds. He drinks heavily at Moe's Tavern most evenings. He has, on separate occasions, been to space, become a professional boxer, managed a country music star, opened a snow plowing business, worked as a food critic, and briefly become a missionary. None of these careers lasted more than a week. He is also, somehow, one of the most beloved characters in the history of television. The standard explanation for why Homer works is that he is funny. He falls down. He says the wrong thing. He chokes Bart. He makes terrible decisions with complete confidence and then suffers the consequences in ways that are satisfying to watch. The comedy is real. But comedy alone does not explain 35 years of genuine affection from an audience that has watched Homer do genuinely indefensible things across hundreds of episodes. There is something else operating underneath the laughs, and that something else is what the people who call Homer their favorite character are actually responding to. To understand it properly, the place to start is with what Homer actually is in psychological terms. And psychology has had a very clear answer to this question for a long time. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian doctor who spent the late 1800s and early 1900s building what became the foundation of modern psychology, argued that the human mind has 3 parts working against each other at all times. The first part he called the id. The id is the oldest, most primitive part of the mind. It does not think. It does not plan. It wants what it wants right now, and it does not care about consequences. It is the part of the mind that reaches for the donut even when it has just been told the donut is poisoned. It is the part that stays at the bar for one more drink even when it promised to be home for dinner. It operates entirely on what Freud called the pleasure principle. Seek pleasure, avoid pain, do it immediately, worry about everything else later. Homer Simpson runs almost entirely on this part of the mind. This is not a casual observation. It is the conclusion of a full academic thesis written at the University of Iceland, which examined Homer's behavior across multiple episodes and found that his defining characteristic across every storyline, every season, every adventure is the same: immediate gratification without reflection. When Homer is hungry, he eats. When Homer is bored, he acts. When Homer feels uncomfortable, he removes himself from the discomfort as fast as possible, usually by eating or drinking or sleeping. He does not sit with difficult feelings. He does not process. He reacts. This is why the famous donut is not just a running gag. The donut is the clearest possible symbol of Homer's relationship with the world. It is immediate pleasure. It is round and simple and available. It does not ask anything of him. Homer's face when he sees a donut, the eyes wide, the hands reaching, the complete shutdown of every other cognitive process, is not just a comedy beat. It is a portrait of a mind that has never fully developed the capacity to delay what it wants. The episode that makes this clearest is from season 7. Homer decides that being fat enough to qualify as disabled would allow him to work from home in a muumuu. He consults a doctor who recommends a slow, deliberate overeating process. Homer commits to this plan with more focus and dedication than he has brought to anything else in the show's history. The goal is not health. The goal is not success. The goal is the ability to eat without restriction and never have to go to work. It is the pleasure principle in its purest possible form, the total removal of effort from the equation of living. And yet, the same Homer who devotes himself to gaining disability weight is the Homer who, in Season 2's Homer Alone, realizes within 48 hours that without Marge, the house is unsalvageable. The same Homer who falls asleep at the nuclear safety console is the Homer who, in Season 1, takes a second job to buy Bart a birthday present after spending the Christmas money. The same Homer who chokes his son for backtalk is the Homer who, in dozens of quiet moments across the show's run, reveals that he would do anything, genuinely anything, to protect his family. This is the contradiction that makes Homer work, and it is the contradiction that the people who love him most understand without needing to articulate it. Homer is not a good person in the conventional sense. He is selfish. He is impulsive. He is frequently cruel without meaning to be, and he operates with a level of self-awareness so low that he once failed to recognize his own son at a school event. But he is also real in a way that very few television characters manage to be. He is the parts of the human experience that self-improvement culture has declared unacceptable. The desire to rest, to eat what you want, to not be responsible for everything all the time. Wearing the face of a loving father and husband who somehow, despite everything, keeps the lights on. The episode Homer's Enemy from Season 8 is the most direct examination the show has ever done of what Homer actually represents. Frank Grimes arrives in Springfield as a new employee at the nuclear plant. He is a man who has worked hard his entire life, studied by correspondence while holding down multiple jobs, and achieved his position through sustained effort and sacrifice. He looks at Homer, who got his job through luck, lives in a house he barely owns, and is celebrated in the community despite being objectively incompetent, and feels something break in him. He calls Homer, "What's wrong with America?" He says that in any other country in the world, Homer would have starved to death long ago. The writer of that episode, Josh Weinstein, said in an interview that the premise was simple. What would happen if a real, normal person had to enter Homer's universe and deal with him? Frank Grimes is the answer. He cannot survive it. The confrontation between Frank's earned, effortful life and Homer's accidental, comfortable one is so destabilizing to Frank's sense of how the world works that it destroys him by the end of the episode. The audience watches this and feels something complicated, because Frank is not wrong. Homer has gotten away with things that most real people could never get away with. The world of the show protects Homer from the consequences his behavior would produce in reality. And the audience knows this and watches it happen and laughs and keeps watching. The question is why? The answer has to do with what Homer represents for the people watching, not what they want to be. Most Homer fans are not genuinely aspiring to his level of impulsiveness or his comfort with failure. What Homer represents is permission. The permission to be imperfect without being punished for it. The permission to want things without having to justify the wanting. The permission to be loved, not because of achievement or discipline or moral consistency, but simply because of warmth. Because, underneath the chaos, Homer's love for his family is the one constant in the show that never wavers. The people who love Homer most tend to be people who feel, somewhere in themselves, the weight of being expected to have everything together. They are not necessarily people who are failing. Many Homer fans are responsible, hardworking, organized people in their actual lives. But they feel the pressure of having to be those things. And Homer is the character who walks through that pressure like it is not there. He eats the donut anyway. He takes the nap. He makes the terrible decision and then gets hugged by his family on the other side of it. There is also a more specific thing that Homer fans tend to have in common. They have a high tolerance for the gap between a person's intentions and their actions. Homer intends, genuinely, to be a good father and husband. He fails constantly. But the intention is real, and the people who love him most are people who understand, from personal experience usually, that good intentions and good execution are two entirely different things, and that loving someone means holding both at the same time. This is what the show has been saying about Homer since the pilot. The very first episode, in which he takes a second job as a mall Santa to replace money he spent, is built around the gap between what Homer meant to do and what he actually did. He failed to save the Christmas money. He tried to fix it. The fix was inadequate. His family ended up with a dog nobody asked for, and somehow it worked out. The show has been running that same structure: failure, imperfect attempt at repair, unexpected warmth, for 35 years, and it has not run out of feeling yet. The academic framework describes Homer as the id, and that is accurate. But the reason audiences have loved him for 3 decades is not that he represents the part of the mind that wants things without discipline. The reason they love him is that he represents the possibility of being forgiven for it, of being seen clearly, all the selfishness, all the impulsiveness, all the spectacular failures, and being loved anyway. Homer has been shot, stabbed, electrocuted, crushed, launched into space, and involved in more near-death situations than any reasonable person could survive. He keeps coming back to the same yellow house on Evergreen Terrace. He keeps sitting in the same chair. He keeps eating the same donuts and drinking the same beer and going back to the same job he has never once been good at. And every time he walks through that door to find Marge and the kids, something in the audience relaxes. Because the person who has made every wrong choice is still allowed to come home. The people who love Homer Simpson most are the people who need that to be true. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, The character who comes next built their entire life around being the opposite of Homer. Someone who does not reach for the donut. Someone who manages the chaos. Someone who holds everything together with both hands while quietly, slowly running out of both. Section 3. Marge Simpson. The weight nobody weighs. In Season 3, Episode 15, Marge Simpson is driving the family car. Bart is screaming in the back seat. The traffic is thick and slow and going nowhere. The radio is on. Something small, some tiny, ordinary frustration that would not register on any scale of real problems. Tips the balance on everything she has been carrying for weeks without saying a word about it. She stops the car in the middle of the highway. She gets out. She stands on the bridge. She cannot move. Police cars arrive. She gets arrested. She has not hurt anyone. She has not done anything dangerous. She has simply run out of the ability to keep going, right there in the middle of the road, in front of everyone, with no warning. The show does not make this funny. It plays the scenes straight. Marge sits in the back of a police car, looking like someone who has been emptied out, and the officers are gentle with her, and the audience understands completely without needing an explanation, because the explanation has been building across every episode before this one. The weight she carries is real. The collapse is earned. This episode is called Homer Alone, and it is one of the most honest things The Simpsons has ever put on screen. Not because it is dramatic or groundbreaking, but because it shows something that almost never gets shown. The specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the person who manages everything for everyone else for so long that it becomes invisible, including to the person experiencing it. What makes the bridge scene so precise is what comes immediately after it. The family falls apart within hours of Marge leaving. Homer cannot find Maggie's food. Bart and Lisa deteriorate into chaos. The house, which Marge maintains as a matter of daily invisible labor, begins showing the cracks of her absence almost immediately. Nobody knew how much she was doing because the doing was so consistent that it had become part of the background, like electricity or running water, something only noticed when it stops working. This is the trap that the episode is actually about. Not Marge's breakdown, which is the visible event. The trap is the invisibility that made the breakdown inevitable. The work that does not get acknowledged because it never fails. The person who never fails does not get credit for not failing. They simply become the person who handles things, and the people around them adjust their expectations accordingly, and the expectations calcify into assumption, and the assumption calcifies into something that nobody ever consciously decided, but that everyone now depends on. Marge Jacqueline Simpson is approximately 34 years old. She is a stay-at-home mother to 3 children, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. She keeps the house. She cooks every meal. She manages the family's finances with whatever Homer has not already spent on impulse purchases or bar tabs. She worries. She worries constantly about everything at a level that the show has repeatedly shown crossing the line from normal parental concern into something that causes her genuine physical distress. Her hair falls out from stress in multiple episodes. She develops a gambling addiction during a period of particular pressure. She has a recurring phobia of flying that she traces back, in therapy, to a suppressed memory from her childhood involving her father and his fear of planes. She also sees a therapist regularly. This is confirmed across multiple episodes. The therapy helps. The same problems come back. This is one of the most realistic things the show does with her character. It does not suggest that self-awareness or professional support magically resolves the underlying pressures. Marge understands her anxiety. She still has it. The gambling addiction deserves more attention than it usually gets in discussions of Marge's character, because it is the most direct evidence the show provides of what happens when her normal management systems break down. The episode is Stoller Springfield from Season 5. Homer opens a casino. Marge, who has never gambled before, sits down at a slot machine almost by accident and discovers something unexpected. That the slot machine does not need anything from her. It does not need to be fed or worried about or managed or driven anywhere. It asks nothing. It simply takes her quarters and occasionally gives some back, and the transaction is completely, beautifully free of responsibility. Marge becomes addicted quickly. The addiction is played partly for comedy, but mostly for what it reveals. She neglects the children. She neglects the house. She sits at the machine for hours while everything she normally maintains falls into disrepair around her. And the show makes very clear that this is not a character flaw. It is a pressure valve. Marge has been holding everything for so long, with so little release, that the first thing that offered her genuine escape from the weight of holding became compulsive almost immediately. The slot machine was not about gambling. It was about the 15 minutes of not being responsible for anything. This is what burnout actually looks like in real life, underneath the clinical descriptions. Not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet, desperate reach for anything that turns the responsibility off for a moment. The Marge fan recognizes this, not because they have sat at a slot machine, but because they have had their own version of the reach, the thing they turned to when the weight became too much, the temporary exit that became a habit before they noticed it happening. The Freudian reading of Marge, the one used in university psychology classrooms, places her as the ego. In Freud's framework, the ego is the part of the mind that deals with reality. While the id wants immediate pleasure and the superego demands moral perfection, the ego sits in the middle and tries to manage. It looks at what the id wants, looks at what the superego demands, looks at what the external world will actually allow, and tries to find a path through. It is exhausting work. The ego does not get to just want things. It has to negotiate everything. This maps onto Marge with a precision that requires almost no translation. Homer wants what he wants. Lisa has a set of moral standards the family consistently fails to meet. Bart generates chaos at a rate that requires constant management. Maggie is nonverbal and perpetually in some form of danger. And Marge stands in the middle of all of it, negotiating, finding the path through, making sure the bills get paid, the meals get made, the children get to school, the house stays standing. The academic thesis from the University of Iceland that analyzed these characters in depth reached a specific conclusion about Marge. It found that her defining psychological feature is not her love for her family, though that is genuine and consistent, but her relationship with aggression. Marge has a great deal of suppressed anger. This is not speculation. It is visible across the show in specific documented episodes. The anger builds under the surface because she holds it down. She holds it down because expressing it feels wrong to her, because her role, as she understands it, is to hold things together rather than shake them apart. And holding it down works until it does not, until the bridge, until the gambling, until the hair loss, until the episode where she picks up a gun and the weight of every suppressed feeling she has ever had comes rushing up with it. The gun episode, Marge Be Not Proud from Season 7, is not actually about a gun directly, but there is a Season 9 episode called The Cartridge Family, where Homer buys a handgun and Marge, who opposes it strongly, eventually picks it up and finds, to her own visible horror, that she likes the feeling. The show plays this moment with a specificity that it rarely applies to Marge. She is not playing with the gun, she is not being careless. She is standing in the kitchen, holding it, and experiencing something she did not expect to experience, and cannot immediately put down. The feeling is power. The feeling is the opposite of managing. The feeling is having something in her hands that does not negotiate. She gets rid of it. She makes Homer get rid of it. She returns to the negotiating and the managing and the worry. But the moment is in the show, precise and uncomfortable, because the writers understood something about Marge that the surface reading of her character misses completely. The episode Fear of Flying from Season 6 is the one that goes deepest into Marge's internal world. She develops a fear of flying so severe that she cannot board a plane. Homer, in a rare moment of genuine effort on her behalf, takes her to a therapist. The therapy works backwards through layers of avoidance and suppression to a memory Marge had buried, a memory of her father, who also had a fear of flying, and who expressed it by pretending he was a flight attendant rather than a passenger who was afraid. Her fear is not random, it is inherited. It is a learned pattern of avoidance dressed up as something else, passed down without anyone meaning to pass it down. This is one of the most psychologically precise pieces of writing in the show's entire run. The idea that fear can be transmitted from parent to child, not through explicit instruction, but through the child simply watching how the parent deals, or does not deal, with the thing they are afraid of, is a documented, well-established pattern in real psychology. Marge absorbed it without knowing she was absorbing it, carried it for decades without knowing what it was, and only found it when a therapist helped her go looking. The detail about her father pretending to be a flight attendant is the most important part of this reveal. He did not tell Marge he was afraid. He disguised the fear as something functional, as a role, as an identity, as something that had a purpose rather than a wound. He managed the fear by converting it into a performance. And Marge, watching him, learned not that flying was dangerous, but that the way you handle fear is to dress it up as something else and keep moving. She has been applying this lesson to her anger, her ambition, her grief, and her exhaustion for her entire adult life. The bridge was the day the performance ran out of material. The people who love Marge Simpson most tend to be people who recognize this pattern. Not the flying phobia specifically, but the experience of carrying something for a very long time without naming it. The experience of being so focused on managing everything around you that your own internal world becomes a place you rarely visit. The experience of holding things together so consistently that the people around you stop being able to imagine what it would look like if you stopped. Marge fans are often the people in their families, their friendships, their workplaces, who are quietly doing most of the emotional labor. They are the ones who remember everyone's birthday, who check in when someone seems off, who absorb other people's stress so smoothly that nobody notices the absorption happening. They are often not the loudest people in the room. They are the ones the room depends on. The shadow side of this, and Marge's character shows it with unflinching accuracy, is that people who build their lives around managing and nurturing others often end up in a specific trap. They become so practiced at prioritizing other people's needs that they lose the ability to locate their own. Marge, across the show's run, repeatedly reaches for something that is just hers, a career, a passion, a version of herself that exists outside the context of the family, and repeatedly finds that the world around her does not make space for it. She becomes a police officer. She becomes an artist. She opens a pretzel business. She tries painting. Each of these attempts ends with her returning to the role of wife and mother, and the show sometimes frames this as a happy ending, and sometimes frames it as something more complicated than that. The police officer arc from Season 6 is worth sitting with in detail because it shows the full cycle more clearly than any other version of the same story. Marge joins the Springfield Police Department. She is genuinely good at it. She takes the job seriously. She handles difficult situations with the combination of firmness and care that she has been applying to her family for years, and she earns the respect of her colleagues. Then Homer, who cannot handle a version of his wife that has authority and a career independent of him, begins undermining her in small ways that escalate. The relationship comes under strain. Marge has to choose between the job and the marriage. She chooses the marriage. The show frames this as a reflection of Marge's values. She loves Homer. She chooses the family. This is who she is. All of that is true. But it is also the show walking Marge through the exact same door it always walks her through, and the audience knows by this point what is on the other side. The good thing she found for herself ends. She returns to the negotiating and the managing and the worry. The cycle completes. The complicated version is more honest. Marge is not unhappy in her life. She loves her family, genuinely, deeply, and consistently. But she is also a person who, somewhere in her late teens, made a choice, or had a choice made for her, about what her life would look like, and who has been living with the consequences of that choice ever since. She had a future as an artist or a professional. She chose Homer. She chose the family. And she does not regret it exactly, but she also has not fully let go of the version of herself that might have existed otherwise. The episode that shows this most quietly is from season 10, where Marge discovers she was accepted to a prestigious art school as a teenager, but never knew because her mother hid the acceptance letter. She is in her mid-30s when she finds this out. She does not fall apart. She absorbs it the way she absorbs everything, by finding a way to keep going. But the audience sees the moment land. They see what it costs her to fold that information into the version of her life that already exists. What is most revealing about this moment is not Marge's reaction, but her mother's explanation. Her mother hid the letter because she believed that Marge's path was already set, that the art school was a distraction from the life she was meant to live. The mother made a decision about Marge's future on Marge's behalf, without Marge's knowledge, and called it protection. This is the same logic Marge applies to her own family constantly. She manages on behalf of other people because she believes she knows what is best. She absorbs their problems before they can feel them. She smooths the path before they can encounter the obstacle. She learned this from a mother who did it to her, without ever knowing she was learning it. Marge fans see that moment and feel it because they have had versions of that moment. The path not taken, the thing they were capable of that the people around them did not notice or make room for. The quiet discovery years later that there was a door somewhere that nobody told them about. There is also something specific about the way Marge handles Homer that resonates with the people who love her. She does not leave. She does not stop trying. She holds a marriage together with a man who is, by any objective measure, enormously difficult to be married to. Impulsive, selfish, unreliable in ways both small and catastrophic. And she does this not because she has no options or no self-respect, but because she genuinely loves him, and because she sees something in him that his behavior does not always earn. The show gives Marge moments of genuine joy with Homer that make this legible rather than tragic. The flashback episodes, the one showing how Homer and Marge met in high school, reveal a version of Homer that explains why Marge fell for him. He was attentive to her in a way that surprised her. He noticed her when other people did not. He pursued her with a sincere, uncomplicated enthusiasm that she had not encountered before and found genuinely moving. The Homer of the high school flashbacks is not the Homer of the present-day episodes, but the memory of that Homer is part of what Marge carries. She fell in love with the person who saw her. She has been working, ever since, to keep that person present in a man who keeps getting distracted by donuts. This is either the most romantic thing in the show or its most tragic element, depending on where the viewer is sitting. Probably both. The Marge fan tends to be someone who understands that loving imperfect people is not a failure of judgment. It is just what love actually looks like when it is not being cleaned up for television. Marge does not get the dramatic storylines. She does not go on the adventures or make the speeches or have the quotable moments that get turned into merchandise. She keeps the house. She makes the meals. She drives everyone where they need to be. She worries and manages and suppresses, and occasionally, on a bridge in the middle of traffic, runs completely out of road. The people who love her most do not love her in spite of this. They love her because of it, because they see the work, because they know what it costs. And they know something else too, something the show hints at in the episodes where Marge finally, briefly, stops managing and just lives. There is a version of Marge that nobody gets to see very often. Looser, funnier, lighter in a way that does not come from relief, but from actual ease. The spa episode shows it. A few vacation episodes show it. It is a glimpse of the person she was before she became indispensable to everyone around her. That glimpse is what the Marge fan is really watching for. That moment when the weight lifts, even temporarily, and something underneath it turns out to still be there. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, the next character in this series is also carrying something heavy, but the nature of the weight is completely different. Where Marge suppresses to protect the people around her, this character suppresses to protect herself. She is 8 years old, she has an IQ of 159, and she is the loneliest person in Springfield. Section 4. Lisa Simpson, the smartest person in a room that does not care. Lisa Marie Simpson is 8 years old. She has an IQ of 159. She is a member of Mensa. She plays the saxophone with genuine skill, not cartoon skill, not the kind of playing that exists just to show a character is musical, but real playing that the show treats as a genuine form of expression and release. She is a vegetarian. She is a Buddhist. She is an activist who has, over the course of the show, campaigned against cruelty to animals, against environmental destruction, against sexist toys, against corruption in local government, and against a dozen other things that the adults around her either ignore or actively make worse. She is also, by a significant margin, the loneliest character in Springfield. Not lonely in the dramatic sense. She is not friendless in every episode. She is not crying in her room every night. Lonely in the specific, grinding way that comes from being surrounded by people who love you, but cannot follow you into the place where your mind actually lives. Her father means well, but cannot sustain a conversation with her for more than a few exchanges before the gap between their intellects becomes too wide to bridge. Her mother loves her, but consistently misreads what Lisa needs, confusing emotional support with practical management. Her brother Bart occupies a completely different world. Her classmates at Springfield Elementary see her as a target, a curiosity, or a resource. Someone to copy homework from, not someone to eat lunch with. The show is very honest about this. It does not soften the loneliness into something more comfortable. It shows Lisa sitting alone. It shows her trying to connect and being met with blank looks or mild hostility. It shows the specific kind of hurt that comes not from deliberate cruelty, but from simple incomprehension, from being in a room full of people who are not mean to you, just unable to see you. The academic research on gifted children, real research published in peer-reviewed journals, has documented this pattern extensively. Children who score significantly above average in intelligence frequently experience deep feelings of being different and out of place. They lack peers who share their interests and way of thinking. They can feel, even in a crowded room, profoundly alone. The research uses the word isolation. The Simpsons, without citing a single study, has been showing this reality accurately since season 1. Lisa's IQ of 159 places her in a range that fewer than 1 in a million people occupy. In a school like Springfield Elementary, underfunded, chaotic, staffed by teachers who range from genuinely indifferent to actively hostile toward academic effort, there is no structure in place to meet her. There is no accelerated program. There is no teacher who consistently sees her for what she is. There is, occasionally, a substitute. The episode that defines Lisa's character more completely than any other is Lisa's substitute from season 2. A substitute teacher named Mr. Bergstrom arrives in her class. He is played by Dustin Hoffman, who was credited under a different name, but whose voice is immediately recognizable. Mr. Bergstrom is everything Lisa has never had in a teacher. He is engaged, he is curious, he talks to her like she is an intelligent person rather than a performing animal or an inconvenience. He sees her, not the IQ, not the grades, not the difficult child who corrects adults. He sees the actual person underneath all of that. Lisa falls for this immediately and completely, the way a person does when they have been starving for something and suddenly get a taste of it. She writes him a note. She tells him he is the most important person in her life. And then he leaves, because he is a substitute, because that is what substitutes do. And Lisa is devastated in a way that the show plays with full seriousness. Before he goes, Mr. Bergstrom gives her a note. She opens it later when she is crying, expecting something profound. It says, "You are Lisa Simpson, that is all." 4 words. And it wrecks her and the audience, because those 4 words are doing the work of everything nobody else has ever said to her. Not "you are smart," not "you are special," not "you will be great one day," just "you are who you are, and that is enough, exactly as it stands." The reason those 4 words land so hard is that they are offering Lisa something she has never been given by anyone who should have been giving it. Validation that is not contingent on performance. Acceptance that does not require her to prove anything. The note does not say, "You will do great things," or "You have a bright future," both of which Lisa has heard, both of which place the value in what she will produce rather than who she already is. The note says, "You are," present tense, complete as currently constructed. Mr. Bergstrom leaves on a train. Lisa runs to the station. She gets there in time to see him through the window. He sees her. He waves. The train pulls away. Lisa stands on the platform, and the show lets her stand there for a moment without cutting away, without moving the story on, without resolving the feeling into something more manageable. She is 8 years old, and she has just lost the first teacher who ever saw her. And the show does not pretend this is a small thing. The people who love Lisa most tend to have experienced some version of that need. The need to be seen not for their function, not for what they can do or produce or contribute, but for who they actually are underneath the performance. They are often people who were, at some point in their lives, the smart one in the room, the one who read ahead, who asked the questions the teacher did not have answers to, who found the schoolwork easy in ways that isolated them rather than connecting them to their peers. Being the smart one sounds like an advantage. In certain environments it is. In a lot of environments, it is the opposite. It creates a distance from the people around you that nobody knows how to close, including you. Lisa fans know this distance. Many of them grew up with it. Some of them are still living with it. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with being the person who understands things that other people around them do not. Lisa experiences this constantly. She sits in class and already knows the answer. She sits at the dinner table and already sees 3 moves ahead of the conversation everyone else is having. She reads books that nobody around her has read and watches things happen in Springfield that she can explain and predict and analyze. And none of the explaining or predicting or analyzing changes anything, because the people she is explaining it to either cannot follow or do not want to. This is not arrogance on Lisa's part, though the show is honest that it can look like arrogance from the outside. It is the specific fatigue of perpetual mismatch, of being calibrated for a frequency that your immediate environment cannot receive, of having all this capacity and nowhere nearby to put it. The saxophone is the solution the show gives her, and it is a good solution. Not a complete one, but good. Music does not require explanation or comprehension from an audience. It communicates directly, bypassing the intellect that has become both Lisa's greatest asset and her primary source of isolation. When she plays, she is not smarter than anyone in the room. She is not trying to be. She is simply expressing something that does not need translation, and the relief of that, after all the translation she does all day, converting her actual experience into a form that the people around her can process, is visible in how the show depicts her playing. She closes her eyes. The shoulders drop. Whatever she is holding while she manages being Lisa Simpson gets set down for the duration of the song. There is a second layer to Lisa's loneliness that the show explores just as carefully, and it is less discussed. Lisa is not just lonely in the world, she is lonely in her own family. She loves the Simpsons. She is fiercely attached to them. But she has spent her childhood in a home where her gifts were not nurtured, where her emotional needs were consistently met with confusion or good-natured incomprehension, and where the version of her that exists in her own head, the version who could go to a great university, who could change things, who could matter on a large scale, has never once been reflected back at her by the people closest to her. The show makes this structural. Lisa's intelligence is established as partly coming from her grandmother. Homer, specifically, cannot keep up with his daughter. This is not played as a tragedy within the family. It is played as a fact of life, even a source of gentle comedy. But the cumulative effect of years of living in a home where nobody can meet you intellectually is a specific kind of loneliness, and it shapes Lisa's entire psychology. She reaches outward, toward causes, toward institutions, toward the idea of a future that looks different from her present, because reaching inward, toward the family that loves her but cannot fully see her, does not give her what she needs. Her activism is real and her convictions are genuine, but they also serve a psychological function. When Lisa cares about a cause, she has somewhere to put the enormous amount of energy and intelligence and feeling that her daily life has no container for. The saxophone works the same way. There are Lisa episodes where she sits alone and plays, and the playing carries every emotion the scene does not say out loud. The show uses her music as a kind of second language, the one she speaks when English is not enough. The episode Bart's Dog Gets an F from Season 2 contains a small moment that illustrates something important about Lisa's family role. The family's dog, Santa's Little Helper, is failing obedience school. The family sends him away for training. Lisa cries. The show acknowledges her emotional sensitivity, then moves on, because the emotional sensitivity of the 8-year-old is not the main story. This is normal for Lisa. Her feelings are real, they are visible, and then the story moves on, because the story is usually about someone else. This happens to Lisa fans in real life. Their feelings are real. They are visible to anyone paying attention. And then the story moves on, because the story is usually about someone else. Lisa is typed by personality frameworks the show's creators did not design around, but which fit her precisely as an INFJ, one of the rarest personality types, defined by a combination of deep caring, strong intuition, and the specific loneliness of being tuned into a frequency that most people around you cannot hear. INFJs represent somewhere between 1 and 3% of the population. They feel things deeply and are often exhausted by how much they feel. They have high standards for themselves, for the world, for the people they love, and are repeatedly, consistently disappointed by the gap between what things could be and what they actually are. This is Lisa's permanent condition, the gap between what Springfield is and what it could be, the gap between what her family is and what she needs them to be, the gap between her own capabilities and what the world around her makes room for. She lives in that gap every day. She has turned the living in it into saxophone music and school projects and petitions and activism, because a person has to do something with that much feeling. The episode Lisa the Iconoclast from Season 7 shows what happens when Lisa tries to correct a lie the entire town has built its identity around. She discovers that the founder of Springfield, Jebediah Springfield, was not the heroic figure the town celebrates, but a fraud. She tries to tell the truth. Nobody wants to hear it. The town turns against her. She eventually decides at the end of the episode to keep the lie intact, not because she stops believing in truth, but because she watches the way the myth functions for the people around her and makes a choice about what truth is actually for. This is Lisa at her most complex. She is 8 years old, and she is making a decision that most adults never have to consciously make. The decision between being right and being kind, between the truth as an abstract value and the truth as something that lands on actual people with actual consequences. She chooses kindness. She keeps the secret. She puts the slide back in the projector and joins the parade. And nobody ever knows she made that choice. That is very, very Lisa. The weight of that unwitnessed goodness accumulates across the whole show. Lisa makes the right choice constantly, in small ways and large ones. And the right choice almost never comes with acknowledgement. She holds things she could say. She protects people who do not know they are being protected. She absorbs the loneliness of being the person who sees clearly in a world that does not reward clear seeing. And she keeps showing up to Springfield Elementary the next morning anyway. There is an episode from season 8 called Lisa's Date with Density, where Lisa develops feelings for Nelson Muntz, the school bully, the kid who punches other kids for lunch money, the last person anyone would expect Lisa to be drawn to. The show is generous about why this happens. Nelson, for all his roughness, is direct. He does not perform. He does not manage or negotiate or present a version of himself calibrated to social expectations. He is exactly what he appears to be without apology. Lisa, who spends every day surrounded by people who cannot see her, finds herself drawn to someone whose interior matches their exterior, even if what is on both sides is difficult. The relationship does not last. Nelson is not capable of the kind of engagement that Lisa needs, and Lisa eventually acknowledges this. But the episode matters because it reveals something about what Lisa is looking for, beyond the obvious answer of intellectual equals. She is looking for authenticity, for someone who means what they say and says what they mean, for the relief of not having to translate. The people who love Lisa most have made versions of that choice. They have known something that would have hurt the people around them if said out loud, and they have held it. They have prioritized the room's comfort over their own need to be right. They have done the right thing in a way that went completely unnoticed, and found the combination of rightness and invisibility to be something they could live with, even when it cost them. Lisa fans are often people carrying a version of her specific weight, the weight of caring more than the situation seems to require, of seeing more than is comfortable, of wanting things to be better with a stubbornness that does not diminish no matter how many times the world fails to cooperate. They did not choose Lisa because she is the smart one. They chose her because she is the one who keeps going anyway. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next character in this series carries no such idealism, no activism, no saxophone, no belief that things could be better if people just tried harder. The next character has watched the world carefully for 35 years and arrived at a conclusion that functions as both a shield and a prison. The belief that everything is terrible, that he knows exactly how terrible, and that saying so out loud is the only honest response available. Section 5. Bart Simpson, the kid who was never going to sit down. Bart Simpson is 10 years old. He weighs 65 pounds. He rides a skateboard. His permanent record at Springfield Elementary is thicker than most adult criminal files. He has prank called Moe's Tavern hundreds of times. He has been arrested, expelled, sued, and on one occasion accidentally licensed as a doctor. He has spray painted his name on a water water tower, released 100 mice into the school gymnasium, and once mailed his teacher's car to Guam. He writes the same line on the blackboard at the start of every episode as punishment, a different line each time, always something he has already done or is about to do again. He is also, underneath every single one of those pranks, one of the most emotionally sensitive characters the show has ever built. The surface reading of Bart is the one that made him a cultural phenomenon in the early 1990s. The t-shirts, the catchphrases, the underachiever and proud of it identity. An entire generation of children absorbed Bart as the avatar of deliberate, cheerful rule breaking. The kid who did exactly what every other kid wanted to do and felt no guilt about it. He was a release valve. He was permission. He was the cartoon version of the feeling every child has sitting in a classroom, listening to a teacher drone on about something that does not matter, thinking, what if I just did not do this? The t-shirts sold millions. The merchandise was everywhere. But the people who genuinely love Bart as a favorite, not as a nostalgic symbol, not as a cultural relic, but as an actual character, are responding to something that went much deeper than the catchphrases. Academic psychology has looked at Bart carefully and found a portrait that is more precise and more uncomfortable than the underachiever brand suggested. The clinical picture is not simple. Bart displays symptoms that overlap with several recognized patterns in child psychology. His inability to pay attention in class, his impulsiveness, his difficulty following rules and completing tasks he finds meaningless, these align with how attention deficit and hyperactivity patterns present in real children. At the same time, his deliberate defiance of authority, his rule breaking, his arguing with adults, his capacity to deceive, these align with what psychologists call oppositional defiant patterns. The two often appear together in real children, and Bart is drawn with enough accuracy that university-level abnormal psychology courses have used him as a case study. But here is the thing that the clinical picture misses if you stop there. Bart can organize. When he wants something badly enough, he can plan, lead, execute, and adapt. He runs schemes that require genuine strategic thinking. He manages groups of other children with a natural authority that Homer Simpson has never once managed with adults. He is not incapable of focus. He is incapable of focus on things that do not matter to him. The moment something matters, he is fully present. This is not how genuine attention disorders typically work. This is how a kid works when the environment has failed to give him anything worth paying attention to. Springfield Elementary is not a good school. This is not a background detail. The show uses the school's dysfunction as a running theme across its entire run. The teachers range from burnt out to incompetent to genuinely punitive. The curriculum is taught to a level that challenges nobody. The administration, in the form of Principal Skinner, is more concerned with rules being followed than with children being educated. There is no program for a child like Bart. There is detention and the permanent record and the resigned expectation that he will fail. He fails. He meets the expectation. The school and Bart have made a deal, unconsciously, to confirm each other's worst assumptions, and they have been keeping that deal since the first episode. The relationship between Bart and Homer is one of the most complex in the show, and it is the key to understanding what Bart actually is beneath the pranks. Homer strangles Bart. This is a running gag, treated as comedy, and it is also, when you sit with it for a moment, a portrait of a father whose only available response to frustration with his son is physical. Not abusive in the sense the show would ever address directly, but thoughtless, reactive. The hands going to the neck before the brain has time to ask whether this is the right response. Bart grew up watching Homer fail forward through life on luck and warmth and the stubborn goodwill of everyone around him. He also grew up being choked when he was annoying. He loves Homer. The show makes this clear and returns to it across dozens of episodes. But he has also absorbed, from years of living with him, a specific lesson: that fathers are people who mean well and hurt you anyway. He has absorbed the warm part and the careless part in equal measure. One of the most quietly devastating demonstrations of what Bart has absorbed from Homer is in the season 5 episode, Bart Gets Famous. Bart becomes a one-hit celebrity after accidentally saying a stupid phrase on Krusty's show. The phrase takes off, it becomes merchandise and imitations, and the whole machinery of a cultural moment, and Bart rides it until the moment passes and everyone loses interest. When it is over, when the fame has evaporated and he is just a 10-year-old again with nothing to show for it, Homer sits with him and says something that the show treats with complete sincerity, that Bart can be whoever he wants to be, and that the family will love him regardless. It is the closest Homer ever comes to saying exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. And Bart, who has spent the whole episode chasing external validation, sits with the simplicity of it, and the scene ends quietly. These are the Homer-Bart moments that the Bart fan returns to, not the strangling, the sitting. The episode that cracks Bart open most completely is Bart Sells His Soul from season 7. Bart, as a prank, tells Milhouse that souls are not real and sells his own for $5. He spends the episode gradually becoming aware that something is wrong, not physically, not dramatically, but in a quiet, growing way that he cannot explain or dismiss. Things that used to feel good feel flat. He tries to laugh, and the laugh does not come from the right place. He has a dream in which everyone around him has a version of themselves rowing a boat with their soul as a companion, and Bart's boat is empty. He rows alone. He does not tell anyone how he feels. He sits with it. At the end of the episode, he kneels beside his bed at night, a 10-year-old, alone, in the dark, and speaks directly to whatever might be listening. He asks for his soul back. He says he knows he does not pray, but he is asking now. He says he just wants it back. This is the most spiritually sincere moment in the show's entire run. There is no punchline. There is no deflection. There is just Bart, without the skateboard and without the attitude, asking for the one thing he gave away and then found out he needed. Milhouse has bought it back for him by this point, bought it from Comic Book Guy with something precious of his own. Bart gets the soul back. He does not say thank you because he is Bart, and Bart does not say thank you. But he holds the piece of paper it was written on, and the show holds the moment without comment, and it lands the way it does because everything that came before it earned it. What makes the Bart Sells His Soul episode so important is not just the prayer at the end. It is the middle section, the long, quiet stretch where Bart is living with the consequences of what he did and cannot tell anyone about it because he told everyone souls are not real, and telling them it turns out he was wrong would require him to admit vulnerability he has no practice admitting. He sits with the flatness. He tolerates the discomfort of having no one to take it to. He manages the feeling alone, in the way that 10-year-old boys who have learned that vulnerability is a liability manage things, silently and badly, and until they cannot anymore. The Bart fan knows this management. They have sat with their own version of the flatness, unable to name it, unable to hand it to anyone, waiting for something to shift. The people who love Bart most tend to be people who were once labeled something at school. Not always a bad label, sometimes just a category. The class clown, the difficult one, the one with potential who did not apply himself, the one who kept getting sent to the hallway and could not explain, if asked directly, why he kept doing the things that sent him there. Not malice, not stupidity, something closer to a refusal, a deep, instinctive resistance to being made small inside a system that had no real place for him. Bart fans have a specific relationship with authority, not hatred of it, not pure rebellion, something more complicated. They understand that rules exist for reasons. They also understand, from personal experience, that rules are not always applied fairly, that the people making them do not always deserve the power they have, and that compliance has a cost that the compliant people tend not to see because they have never had to pay it. Bart, at his best, is the character who names this, who stands in front of a system that has decided what he is and refuses to accept the verdict, who keeps moving even when the movement gets him in trouble, who is, underneath every detention and every prank call and every line on the blackboard, a child who needed more than his environment gave him and dealt with the shortfall the only way he knew how. There is a detail in the show that is easy to miss. Bart is described as genuinely good at the things that interest him. He is a skilled skateboarder. He has real comic timing. He shows, in episodes that give him room, a deep and genuine loyalty to the people he loves. In Bart the Lover from Season 3, he writes love letters for his teacher, Mrs. Krabappel, using the voice of a fictional man named Woodrow. The letters are tender and specific, and more emotionally intelligent than anything else Bart does in the entire season. He is hiding behind a fake name, but the feeling is real. The care is real. The Woodrow letters are worth staying with. The assignment Bart is given as punishment is to write kind notes to Mrs. Krabappel for a week, as a way of understanding the impact of his behavior on her. He starts doing it reluctantly, making up a fictional admirer named Woodrow, and somewhere in the process of inventing this person, the letters become real. Woodrow writes things that Bart Simpson could never say in his own name. Warm, considered, genuinely attentive things about Mrs. Krabappel as a person. The family helps him write the letters. The family, gathered around the kitchen table, pooling their genuine emotional intelligence to give Bart the words his own situation does not allow him to say. Mrs. Krabappel falls for Woodrow. The show handles this with care. It does not play her feelings as a joke. She is a lonely woman who has received a letter that sees her, and she responds to it the way real people respond to being seen. When Bart eventually sends a final letter from Woodrow letting her down gently, the show allows her the dignity of being genuinely moved rather than making her a punchline. And Bart, who could not be kind in his own name, managed to be kind through borrowed words. The capacity was there the whole time. The name was the problem. The category that came with the name was the problem. Bart Simpson, class disruption, permanent record, hands going to the neck. Woodrow, whoever he was, got to be a different kind of person. He can access all of it. He just cannot always access it when the classroom expects him to, in the format the classroom requires, on the schedule the classroom sets. The Bart fan recognizes this. They have their own version of the classroom that never quite worked for them, their own version of the permanent record that describes someone who is not quite them, their own version of the talent that existed in a form the system around them did not know how to assess. They love Bart because Bart kept going, because the permanent record did not become the permanent truth, because the kid who wrote the same punishment line on the blackboard hundreds of times still had a soul worth buying back. The show has always known something about Bart that the t-shirts never captured. He is not actually proud of being an underachiever. He is proud of being himself. These are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where the real Bart lives. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, across the street from the Simpson house, in a home that is always slightly better kept, with a lawn that is always slightly greener and a smile that never quite drops, lives a man who has spent his entire life being the opposite of Bart, the opposite of Homer, the opposite of everything impulsive and unmanaged and real. And the cost of that, the specific, documented, psychologically precise cost of being that relentlessly, deliberately good, is one of the most surprising things the show has ever decided to tell the truth about. Section 6, Ned Flanders, the nicest man who ever needed help. Nedward Flanders Jr. lives at 744 Evergreen Terrace, right next door to The Simpsons. His lawn is immaculate. His house is well maintained. He waves at his neighbors every morning with a cheerfulness that has never once dimmed in over 35 years. He says diddly and doodly and okily dokily. He does not drink. He does not swear. He does not dance. He keeps kosher, as he explains in one episode, just to be on the safe side. He reads the Bible literally, follows it to the best of his ability, and calls Reverend Lovejoy so frequently with minor religious questions that Lovejoy has, over the years, simply stopped caring about the calls. He is also, according to a multi-university study involving researchers from Oxford's Institute of Cognitive and Evolutionary Anthropology, the character whose name has entered real academic language. The Ned Flanders effect is a documented phenomenon, the finding that highly religious people are often perceived by non-religious people as closed-minded and unattractive as romantic partners, regardless of whether that perception reflects reality. Ned Flanders, a fictional cartoon character, became the reference point for this in published research. His name also gave the world another real term: Flanderization, the process by which a single character trait gets amplified over time until it swallows the whole person, is named after him. It is used in media criticism to describe any character who begins as a complex human being and ends as a caricature of one quality. The irony is deep. The character who gave his name to the concept of losing complexity is, when examined carefully, one of the most psychologically complex people in Springfield. Ned did not start as the religious fanatic he eventually became. In the earliest seasons of the show, he was simply the neighbor who was a little too good, a little too cheerful, a little too helpful, a little too perfect in ways that made Homer feel worse about himself by comparison. The religion was there, but it was background detail, not the whole personality. As the seasons went on, the religious aspect grew. The complexity underneath it became harder to see. This is, fittingly, exactly what Flanderization describes. But the complexity is there. The show put it there deliberately, in one episode, with enough care and precision that it stands as one of the finest pieces of character writing in the show's history. Hurricane Nettie is the 8th episode of Season 8. A hurricane hits Springfield. When the storm clears, the Simpsons' house is completely unharmed. The only building destroyed is the Flanders home. Everything Ned owns, his belongings, his children's belongings, his entire physical world, is gone. The town rallies. Marge organizes the residents of Springfield to rebuild the Flanders house as a surprise. They work for days. They do their best. And when Ned arrives to see what they have done for him, the house is a disaster. Crooked walls, mismatched materials, doors that open onto nothing. A structure held together by goodwill and incompetence in roughly equal measure. Homer leans on the front door frame and the whole thing collapses. Ned looks at the wreckage. He looks at the people who built it, all of them watching him with expectant faces, waiting for the gratitude and the diddly-doos and the smile that never drops. And something in him comes completely apart. He turns to the assembled townspeople and he tears into them. Not with cartoon anger, with real, specific, accumulated fury. He goes through them one by one. He names their flaws. He calls Homer a big, dumb animal. He tells them all exactly what he has never said in 35 years of being their neighbor, their friend, their endlessly patient next-door saint. Then he checks himself into a mental hospital voluntarily because he is frightened by what just came out of him. The mental hospital is where the show reveals what Ned Flanders actually is. His childhood psychiatrist, Dr. Foster, arrives. Through flashbacks, the audience meets Ned's parents. They are beatnik hippies, loose, free, devoted to the 1960s idea that rules and structure and discipline are forms of oppression. Baby Ned, shown in these flashbacks, is a wild, aggressive, out-of-control child. Not because there is something wrong with him, because there are no rules, no boundaries, no structure. No one telling him what behavior is acceptable and what is not. He runs and screams and hits, and nobody stops him, because stopping him would interfere with their philosophy. His parents bring him to Dr. Foster. They explain the situation. Dr. Foster puts young Ned through what the show calls the University of Minnesota Spankological Protocol. 8 months of continuous spanking. The treatment works. Ned's aggression disappears completely. He becomes calm, gentle, cooperative, and rule-following to a degree that far exceeds normal. The treatment works too well. It does not teach Ned to manage his anger. It teaches him that anger does not exist. It buries the anger so deep and so completely that Ned genuinely does not know it is there. For decades he lives on top of a volcano he cannot feel. The diddly-doos and oakley-dokleys are not, as the show reveals in this episode, simply verbal tics or character quirks. They are the sound of suppression in real time. When Ned is close to losing his temper, when the anger underneath begins to push up against the surface, his language breaks down into nonsense syllables. He cannot quite get the actual words out. The frustration comes up, reaches the point where normal language would become something he is not allowed to say, and dissolves into diddly-dang-doodly-doo. This is his system. This is what 40-something years of deeply trained suppression looks like when it reaches its limit. The show uses the word suppression deliberately, and suppression in real psychology is not the same as resolution. Suppression means the feeling is still there, stored somewhere, accumulating pressure. The holding back of aggression, as Freud wrote, is in general unhealthy and leads to illness. Ned Flanders is a walking illustration of this principle, built into a cartoon neighbor who makes excellent chocolate chip cookies and lends Homer tools that never come back. The question of why someone becomes Ned is answered by his backstory, and the answer is precise. A child raised without structure reaches for the most total structure available. A child who was never given rules grabs hold of the most complete rulebook he can find. For Ned, that rulebook is the Bible, taken literally, followed completely, applied to every aspect of life, including the ones that do not require biblical guidance. God becomes, as the academic analysis of this character has noted, the father Ned never had. The perfectly ordered, perfectly just, perfectly consistent authority that his actual parents were entirely incapable of providing. This is not a cynical reading of Ned's faith. His faith is genuine. His goodness is genuine. He is, as the show consistently demonstrates, a truly kind man who helps people without being asked, who loves his children with consistency and warmth, who has extended grace to Homer Simpson more times than any reasonable person would. The writer Mike Scully, who worked on the show, described Ned as everything Homer would love to be, even though Homer will never admit it. This is accurate, and it is also the key to why Homer hates him. Homer hates Ned because Ned is the mirror Homer cannot stand to look in. Ned does the things Homer cannot do. He controls himself. He shows up. He maintains. He does not reach for the donut when the donut is wrong. And Homer, who knows somewhere that he should be more like his neighbor but will never choose to be, converts that knowledge into loathing, because loathing is easier. Ned takes the loathing. He takes it and absorbs it and keeps waving from the driveway, keeps offering to help, keeps being the neighbor Homer does not deserve. This is partly genuine Christian virtue, turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor. It is also, the show suggests carefully, the behavior of someone who has been trained from childhood that anger is not an option, and who therefore has no choice but to absorb whatever the world throws at him and convert it into diddly-doos. The Hurricane Nettie episode ends with Dr. Foster declaring Ned cured after he finally admits out loud to another person that he hates his parents. Not in a diddly-do way, in a real way, the actual word. And Ned is freed by it. He walks out of the hospital and promises the gathered townspeople that in the future, when they offend him, he will tell them so. And then he adds cheerfully that if they continue to offend him after that, he will run them down with his car. The audience laughs. But the laughter is the laughter of relief. Relief that something buried that deep finally got to breathe. The people who love Ned Flanders most are rarely the people you would expect. They are not always the religious viewers who see themselves in his faith, though some of them are. The deeper Ned fans, the ones who call him their genuine favorite, tend to be people who have built a strong set of rules for themselves that functions as a container for something underneath the rules. People who are extremely good at being good. People who smile when they want to scream. People who absorb other people's behavior with a patience that costs more than the other people know. They love Ned because they recognize the architecture. Not the religion specifically, the architecture underneath it. The structure built to house something that the person inside it has been told, in one way or another, is not allowed to exist. There is also a group of Ned fans who love him for his losses. Ned's wife Maud dies in season 11, struck by a t-shirt cannon at a racing event. The death is abrupt and unheroic and strange, and Ned is left a widower with 2 young boys and no explanation from God that satisfies him. He does not stop believing. He does not rage at the universe in a satisfying dramatic way. He grieves quietly, unevenly, in the way real grief works rather than the way television usually shows it. Ned Flanders loses things. He loses his wife. He loses his faith temporarily in Hurricane Nettie. He loses the respect of the town he has spent decades serving. He loses the composure he has spent his whole life constructing. And every time he rebuilds. He puts the diddly-doos back in place. He waves from the driveway again. He keeps going with a stubbornness that does not look like stubbornness because it is dressed in cheerfulness. The people who love Ned most understand that this kind of keeping going, the quiet, daily, undramatic kind, is the hardest kind there is. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, across town, in a building that darkens its own corner of Springfield, sits a man who has kept going for well over 100 years by an entirely different method. No diddly-doos, no faith, no warmth extended to neighbors. What he has instead is power, and the terrifying freedom that comes with having so much of it that the normal rules of human behavior stopped applying to him a very long time ago. Section 7. Mr. Burns, the richest man in the world, has nothing. Charles Montgomery Plantagenet Schicklgruber Burns owns the Springfield nuclear power plant. He is the wealthiest man in Springfield and one of the wealthiest in the state. He has holdings in industries that span most of the 20th century. He once attempted to block out the sun above Springfield so that residents would be forced to use his electricity around the clock. He releases hounds on visitors he dislikes. He cannot remember the name of his most frequent employee, despite decades of daily interaction. He refers to Homer Simpson, when he refers to him at all, as everything from that man to that simpleton, to names that suggest he genuinely cannot hold the information that this specific human being exists. He is believed to be somewhere between 80 and 120 years old, depending on which episode episode is doing the counting. The show treats his age inconsistently, as it does with most things, but the consistent implication is that Mr. Burns has outlived the normal span of human life by a considerable margin, and has spent the extra decades accumulating things that have not made him happy. The academic reading of Mr. Burns is one of the clearest in the show. A paper analyzing the characters of The Simpsons through clinical psychological frameworks diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder, not as a loose cultural insult, the way the word narcissist gets used in everyday conversation, but as a clinical assessment against the specific criteria of the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual used by psychologists and psychiatrists. To meet the clinical threshold, a person needs to show at least 5 of 9 specific criteria. The paper found that Mr. Burns shows considerably more than 5. The criteria he meets include an excessive need for admiration from people who openly dislike him, a belief that he is uniquely special and important, the use of money and power to act as though consequences do not apply to him, and a complete inability to feel genuine empathy for the people around him. When employees come to him with concerns, he releases the hounds. When Homer asks for a raise and Burns makes him perform humiliating acts for money, he does not see the humiliation, he sees the entertainment. The feelings of the people around him do not register as real to him in the way that his own feelings register as real. This is the textbook picture of the disorder. Burns is drawn to match it so precisely that he functions as a teaching example. But the clinical picture is where most analysis of Mr. Burns stops, and stopping there misses the thing that makes him one of the show's most unexpectedly affecting characters. Because underneath the narcissism, underneath the hounds and the power and the century of accumulated wealth, there is a specific wound that the show has been carefully pointing at since the early seasons. And it is a wound that the people who love Mr. Burns as their favorite character are almost always responding to, even if they could not immediately name it. The episode is Rosebud from Season 5. The title is a direct reference to Citizen Kane, the 1941 film about a man who builds an empire and dies alone, and whose final word turns out to be the name of a childhood sled, the last thing from before the money and the power and the isolation. The Simpsons does not borrow this reference casually. It uses it deliberately as a frame for what the episode is going to say about Mr. Burns. Burns is celebrating his birthday. He has everything, every material object, every form of power, every resource that money can acquire, and he is miserable. He goes to bed and he dreams, and in the dream he is a small child again, and he is holding a teddy bear named Bobo, and he is safe and warm in a way that no amount of adult wealth has ever replicated. He wakes up and Bobo is not there. Bobo has been gone for decades. Burns, at whatever age he actually is, with all the power he actually has, wants his childhood teddy bear back with a desperation that he cannot contain or redirect into anything else. He launches a search. He uses his entire apparatus of wealth and surveillance to find one worn, small stuffed bear. The bear eventually turns up in the hands of Maggie Simpson, who loves it the way small children love things, completely, without reason, without the ability to explain why this particular object matters more than any other. Burns tries to take it. He cannot get it back. And in the end, after everything, he lets it go. The moment he lets it go is played with a quietness that the show rarely uses for him. He looks at Maggie holding the bear, and something in his expression changes. Not into warmth exactly, but into recognition. He sees, in the baby holding the object he has spent decades searching for, the thing he lost and the thing Maggie still has. The innocence that existed before the power. The capacity to just hold something and love it without it meaning anything beyond itself. He walks away. The bear stays with Maggie. and Mr. Burns returns to the nuclear plant and the hounds and the forgetting of Homer's name. The people who love Mr. Burns tend to understand this scene in a way that surprises them slightly, because Mr. Burns is not a sympathetic character by design. He does terrible things throughout the show's run, genuine, sustained, deliberate harm to the people and environment around him. He is not redeemable in the way that, for instance, Ned Flanders is redeemable. The harm he does is too calculated, too consistent, too long in duration to be explained away by childhood trauma or suppressed feelings. And yet, there is something in the Bobo scene and in the small moments scattered across the show where Burns reveals the depth of his loneliness that lands for a specific kind of viewer. A viewer who understands, not from Burns's position of extreme wealth and power, but from some smaller personal version of the same dynamic, what it feels like to have pursued something for a very long time and to have arrived at the destination to find it empty. Burns once says, in an episode where he briefly loses his fortune and has to rebuild from nothing, words that the show delivers without irony: "I am, by most measures, a successful man. I have wealth and power beyond the dreams of you and your clock-punching ilk. And yet I have led a solitary life." Solitary is the word the show chooses. Not lonely, not unhappy, not regretful. Solitary. The word of a man who has lived so long inside his own power that the world outside it has become a place he no longer knows how to inhabit. Other people are either tools, obstacles, or irrelevancies. They exist in relation to what he wants from them. The idea of another person existing for their own reasons, with their own inner world that has nothing to do with him, is something Burns genuinely cannot process. This is what extreme narcissism produces over a long enough timeline. Not happiness, not even satisfaction, a kind of sealed existence, airtight, impenetrable, and absolutely alone. The Mr. Burns fan tends to be someone with a sophisticated relationship to darkness. They are rarely people who admire the cruelty. What they admire is the wit. Burns has some of the sharpest, strangest dialogue in the show, delivered with a theatrical commitment that nobody else in Springfield can match. When he speaks, it is with the vocabulary of someone who was educated in a previous era, who has reference points that have been obsolete for 60 years, who occasionally refers to things like ether-powered automobiles and the Kaiser, with the complete confidence of someone who considers these references current. This is genuinely funny. The humor of Burns is the humor of someone so out of touch with the present moment that the gap between his reality and everyone else's has become its own comedy. He does not know what a donut is. He does not understand why his employees have lunch breaks. He refers to the television set as the picture box. He is a man from a different century, inhabiting a world he stopped engaging with at some point during the mid-20th century, and he has enough power that the world has never forced him to update. Burns fans tend to appreciate this kind of comedy, the dark, dry, absurdist variety that does not ask you to feel good about what you are laughing at. They are often people who find the standard emotional register of mainstream culture a little loud, a little performatively upbeat, a little exhausting in its demand that everyone be engaged and warm and relatable. Burns is none of those things, and he does not apologize for it. And there is a specific relief in that for a specific kind of viewer. They also tend to be people who have thought about power, not necessarily people who have it or want it in the Burns sense, but people who have observed how power actually functions in the real world, how it insulates, how it corrupts, how it narrows over time the circle of things and people a powerful person can genuinely engage with. Burns is the end point of that process. He is what happens when power has been the organizing principle of a life for long enough that everything else has atrophied. The show is not subtle about this. It makes Burns a figure of genuine comedy and genuine horror in roughly equal measure, often in the same scene. He can be laughed at and pitied and slightly feared all at once, which is a difficult combination to sustain across hundreds of episodes. The writers manage it by keeping the Bobo wound visible just beneath the surface. No matter how many hounds he releases or how many schemes he runs, the audience knows about the bear. They know about the child who had it. They know what was lost before any of the power was gained. The Mr. Burns fan holds all of this at the same time. The wit and the cruelty and the loneliness and the theater of it. They do not need Burns to be redeemed or softened or made more palatable. They like him precisely as he is, theatrical, terrible, and in possession of a void where other people keep their warmth. There is one more thing the show does with Burns that rarely gets discussed. In the episodes where someone does get through to him, where Smithers, his endlessly devoted assistant, or occasionally Lisa, or a small baby with a bear he wants, manages to access the person underneath the power, Burns does not know what to do with it. He freezes. He becomes briefly, visibly uncertain. The tools he has spent a lifetime using, money, authority, intimidation, the releasing of hounds, do not apply to genuine human connection, and without them, he has no map. He retreats every time, back to the plant, back to the power, back to the solitary life that he described with a word that was much more honest than he probably intended. The people who love Mr. Burns most recognize that retreat. They have their own version of it, the moment when genuine connection became available and something in them pulled back from it, because the tools they normally use do not work there and they do not have other tools ready. They watch Mr. Burns and they see, dressed in a three-piece suit and theatrical villainy and 100 years of deliberate isolation, a portrait of what it costs to protect yourself from everything, including the things worth not being protected from. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, the next character has never had Burns's power, or Homer's warmth, or Lisa's intelligence. He has a bar, a few bar regulars, and a face that the show has used as a punchline since the first episode. What he also has, buried under the gruffness and the failed schemes and the prank calls he keeps answering, is one of the most honest portrayals of what it feels like to be genuinely, persistently, structurally alone that American television has ever put on screen. Section 8. Mo Sislak, the bartender at the end of the world. Mo's Tavern sits on a corner in Springfield that the show never makes feel particularly inviting. The lighting is dim, the floor is sticky, the beer is bad, the taxidermied animals on the wall look like they died confused. The bar has no website, no happy hour specials worth mentioning, and a proprietor who greets new customers with a hostility that suggests their arrival has personally offended him. The phone rings regularly with prank calls from a 10-year-old boy asking for people named Alcoholic and Amanda Hugginkiss, and Mo answers every single one with the same furious, humiliated sincerity, as though this time it might be real. Mo'omar Morris Sislak has been running this bar for the entirety of the show's run. He was there in the first episode, and he is there now. He drinks alone after closing. He has attempted suicide multiple times across the show's history, not as background detail or throwaway comedy, but as documented, recurring story beats that the show eventually began treating with genuine seriousness. He has tried to jump off a bridge in season 14. He has tried to hang himself in season 24. Season 17 contains a Christmas episode in which Mo reveals, almost casually, that he attempts to take his own life every holiday season. The show plays these moments differently depending on the era. In earlier seasons, the suicidal ideation is mostly dark comedy, part of the texture of Mo's misery, treated as a character note rather than a storyline. In later seasons, specific episodes build entire plots around his depression and his loneliness, and the specific, grinding difficulty of being a person who has been dealt a consistently bad hand and has not found a way to fold or to change the game. These episodes, Mo Baby Blues, Whiskey Business, Mona Lisa, Eeny Teeny Maya Mo, treat Mo's suffering as something real that deserves real attention. They do not resolve it, they show it, sit with it, and then the next episode, Mo is back behind the bar. This non-resolution is one of the most honest things the show does with him. Real depression does not get resolved by a good episode. Real loneliness does not disappear because one thing went well. The show understands this about Mo in a way it does not fully understand it about any other character, and the people who love Mo most tend to feel this understanding in their bones. The clinical picture of Mo has been assembled carefully by people who analyze these characters through psychological frameworks. The picture that emerges is of a man trapped in a cycle that reinforces itself at every point. He rarely leaves the bar, he does not exercise, he does not look after his physical health in any meaningful way, he eats badly, drinks heavily, and has structured his entire existence around a single location that has become both his livelihood and his prison. He cannot see, or will not see, how the structure of his days is contributing to how he feels. He has convinced himself that the problem is external, his looks, his bad luck, the unfairness of a world that has given other people things it has not given him. This last part is important. Mo is not wrong that the world has been unkind to him. The show does not suggest that his suffering is purely self-created, or that a change in attitude would fix everything. It suggests something more complicated, that Mo has a genuine case, and that his genuine case has hardened over the years into a story he tells himself so completely that it has become the only story available. The story is, I am ugly, I am unlucky, things will not get better, and anyone who seems to like me will eventually leave or turn out to be wrong about me. This story has the quality of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is not to say it is false. It is to say that Mo has lived inside it long enough that it now shapes every choice he makes, and every choice shaped by it tends to confirm it. The episode Mo Baby Blues from season 14 is the one that breaks this open most completely. Mo is on a bridge, the same bridge he has attempted to jump from before, and Maggie Simpson falls from the Simpsons' car during an argument between Homer and Marge. Mo catches her. He does not plan to. He is simply there at the right moment, in the right position, and he catches her before she hits the water. What happens after the catch is the episode's actual story. Mo becomes Maggie's caretaker for a period. He falls in love with her the way adults sometimes fall in love with very small children. Not romantically, not possessively, but with a kind of uncomplicated tenderness that does not ask for anything back and does not require explanation. Maggie cannot talk. She cannot evaluate him. She cannot decide he is ugly or unlucky or not worth knowing. She simply responds to his presence with the openness that babies have before they learn the world's categories. Mo, around Maggie, is a completely different person. Not a better performance of himself. Actually different, softer, more patient, more present. He sings to her. He worries about her safety with a care that he has never once directed at himself. The love is genuine, and it is visible, and it is the most uncomplicated thing Mo has ever felt. The episode ends with Maggie returning to her family and Mo returning to the bar. The love does not go anywhere. It was real. The bar is still the bar. This is the Mo that his fans are watching for, not the prank calls and the gruffness and the failed schemes. Those are the surface, the texture of his daily life, the noise he makes to fill the space. The Mo underneath has a genuine capacity for warmth and tenderness and care that almost never gets an outlet, because the world Mo inhabits does not often create the conditions for it to emerge. The people who love Mo most tend to be people who understand the gap between who they are in daily life and who they are when the conditions are finally right for something better to come out. They know the bar, the routine, the going through the motions, the performance of a version of themselves that is not false exactly, but is not the whole picture. They know what it feels like to love something or someone quietly, without announcement, without the social infrastructure to express it, in a way that does not get witnessed. They also tend to be people who have a specific relationship with dark humor, the kind of humor that does not pretend things are fine, the kind that names the actual situation, the loneliness, the bad luck, the accumulated weight of a life that has not gone the way you wanted, and finds something in it that can be laughed at without the laughter being a lie. Mo's best lines are this kind. When he says in one episode that loneliness and cheeseburgers are a dangerous mix, he is not performing misery for laughs. He is naming a real observation about himself with the precision that only genuine self-knowledge produces. The laugh comes not because the situation is funny, but because the naming is exact. The Wikipedia entry on Mo describes his mood as one that rapidly moves between anger, indifference, and suicidal despair. This is an unusually honest description for an encyclopedia entry about a cartoon character. It is also accurate. Mo's emotional register does not settle, it cycles. He can be furious, then flat, then at the bottom, then back to furious, within a single scene. This is not played for inconsistency. It is played as the realistic texture of a mind that has been under sustained pressure for a very long time, and has no reliable way to regulate itself. Mo has had love interests across the show's run. Most of them end badly. The one that comes closest to working is Maya, introduced in season 20, who is a little person Mo meets and genuinely connects with. They get engaged eventually in season 33. Even this, the closest thing to a real relationship Mo has ever built, is surrounded by uncertainty and the audience's learned expectation that things do not stay good for Mo. The show has trained the viewer carefully and over decades to understand that Mo's happiness is always temporary, not because he does not deserve better, but because the structure of his life and the pattern of his choices and the depth of the story he tells himself about who he is do not leave much room for better to take hold and stay. The people who love Mo most feel this pattern. They may not be living it at the same scale or with the same darkness, but they recognize the mechanics of it, the way that pessimism, developed over enough disappointments, starts to feel like wisdom rather than a wound. The way that keeping expectations low protects you from certain kinds of hurt while guaranteeing a different kind. The way that the bar, whatever your bar is, the thing you return to because it is familiar even when it is not good, becomes harder and harder to leave the longer you have been there. There is a scene in the episode Whiskey Business from season 24 where Mo is rescued from a suicide attempt and subsequently given a makeover and a new suit and sent to a business event where people respond to him positively, warmly, with the kind of social ease and connection that Mo has never experienced. He is, briefly, someone who belongs in a room, someone who is welcomed rather than tolerated. He is kind and charming and genuinely present, and the people around him see it. Then the episode ends and the suit goes back and Mo goes back to the bar. The show does not suggest that the suit was the answer. The show is too honest about Mo for that. The suit was a glimpse. Mo has a lot of glimpses. What he does not have is the sustained external support or the internal shift that would allow the glimpse to become the reality. The Mo fan sits with this without needing it to be fixed. They have made peace, or are making peace, with the idea that some things do not resolve, that some people carry their particular weight for a very long time without putting it down, that the measure of a person is not whether they fix everything, but whether they keep showing up, whether they keep answering the phone, whether they keep opening the bar in the morning, even when there is no particular reason to believe today will be different from yesterday. Mo answers the phone every single time. He knows it is the prank call. Some part of him answers anyway because the alternative is not answering, and not answering is worse. The people who love Mo most understand this. They know what it is to answer the phone when you know what is probably on the other end. They know the specific courage of showing up to a life that has not been particularly kind to you, opening the door, turning the lights on, and being there. They do not need Mo to be redeemed. They need him to keep going. He does. He always does. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, the next character in this series also keeps going, but for reasons that are almost the exact opposite of Mo's. Where Mo has been humbled by life into something genuine and raw, the next character has used knowledge as a fortress. A Harvard degree, a master's thesis written in a language most people cannot read, and a lifetime of expertise deployed not to connect with the world, but to judge it from a safe and elevated distance. He is the smartest person in every room he enters, and he makes absolutely sure everyone in the room knows it. Section 9, Comic Book Guy, the Fortress Made of Knowledge. Jeffrey Albertson has a master's degree in folklore and mythology from Harvard University. His thesis was a translation of The Lord of the Rings into Klingon, a language invented for a science fiction television show that aired its last episode in 1969. He runs a store called The Android's Dungeon and baseball card shop in the Springfield Mall. He is morbidly obese. He has a ponytail. He wears the same blue short-sleeve shirt in essentially every appearance, a shirt that does not fully fit him. He speaks in complete, formally structured sentences at all times, including when he is alone, including when he is ordering food, including when he is in physical distress. His most famous contribution to the cultural record is a single phrase: worst episode ever. This phrase has escaped the show entirely and now lives in everyday language, used by people who have never watched The Simpsons to describe bad meals, bad commutes, bad dates, and bad days. It carries with it, even stripped of its original speaker, the specific tone that Comic Book Guy invented, the tone of someone who has seen everything, assessed everything, found almost everything wanting, and is reporting this verdict with the calm authority of a person who considers themselves the most qualified judge in any room they enter. The phrase captures something true about Comic Book Guy, but only the surface of something true. The full picture is considerably more interesting and considerably more human than the catchphrase suggests. The show gives Comic Book Guy a real name, Jeff Albertson, in Season 16, Episode 8, when he mentions it casually in conversation with Ned Flanders. For years before this, he had no name. He was only the Comic Book Guy, defined entirely by his role and his attitude, with no identity beneath the function. The reveal of a name is a small, humanizing gesture, and the show makes it casually rather than dramatically, which is its own kind of comment. The name was always there. Nobody had asked. His backstory, assembled across multiple episodes, is specific. He grew up in Kingfield, Maine. His childhood was marked by familial neglect and isolation, not dramatic abuse, not a single catastrophic event, but the slow, grinding experience of a child who was not seen or engaged with by the people who were supposed to see and engage with him. He found comics. Comics gave him a world that was more vivid, more structured, more morally legible than the one he was actually living in. The heroes were clear, the villains were clear, the stakes were enormous, and the outcomes eventually made sense. This is what fiction does for lonely children. It provides a world with rules that the actual world does not seem to have. It provides characters who can be understood completely, whose motivations are visible, whose inner lives are laid out on the page rather than hidden behind the social complexity that real people carry. For a child who is not well served by the social world, who does not read the signals correctly, who does not find easy entry into the groups that form naturally around shared experience, fiction is not escapism in the dismissive sense. It is a functional replacement for something the social world is not providing. Comic Book Guy built his entire adult life around this replacement. He became the world's foremost authority in his own assessment, and possibly in reality, on a category of fiction. He went to Harvard and wrote a thesis that connected that fiction to the oldest storytelling traditions in human history. He opened a store so that he could spend every day surrounded by the thing that had sustained him since childhood, and so that other people who needed what he had found would know where to come. None of this is the behavior of a person who does not care. All of it is the behavior of a person who cares enormously about a very specific set of things, and who has organized his whole existence around protecting and tending to that caring. The contempt, the worst episode ever, the withering assessments of customers, the sarcasm deployed at anyone who demonstrates insufficient knowledge, is not the opposite of caring. It is the other face of it. When Comic Book Guy tells a customer that their taste is wrong, or that their understanding of a character's history is incorrect, or that the item they are excited about is actually of poor quality, he is not performing superiority for its own sake. He is applying standards that matter to him with a rigor that most people reserve for things the world officially certifies as important. He treats comic books with the seriousness that professors treat literature. He is not wrong that this seriousness is warranted. He is wrong about the delivery. The delivery is the problem, and the delivery comes from the same place the knowledge comes from a childhood in which the only reliable source of structure and meaning was not other people but objects, not connection but expertise. The knowledge of comics did not require reciprocity. It did not threaten rejection. It did not look at him with the specific blankness that people use when they do not know what to do with the child in front of them. It simply existed, available and consistent and expandable without limit. The more he learned, the more there was to learn. The more he mastered, the more the mastery held. This is what knowledge becomes for certain people. Not a tool for engaging with the world, but a wall for keeping it at a manageable distance. A place to stand that nobody can take from you because the ground you are standing on is made of things you have studied more thoroughly than anyone around you. When Comic Book Guy says, "worst episode ever," he is not just offering a verdict. He is reminding himself and everyone present that he is the one qualified to issue verdicts, that his position is secured by something that cannot be challenged, that he is, in this specific domain, unreachable. The episode that cracks this open is I Am Furious Yellow from Season 13. Bart creates a comic book featuring an angry character based on Homer. The comic becomes popular. Comic Book Guy critiques it harshly and publicly because by his assessment it is poor quality work. Then Stan Lee arrives at the store, the real Stan Lee, voiced by himself, making a guest appearance. Stan Lee, who co-created Spider-Man and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, who is the single most significant figure in the history of the medium that Comic Book Guy has built his life around. Comic Book Guy meets his idol. Stan Lee sees Bart's comic and responds to it positively, warmly, as a genuine piece of creative work. He does not apply Comic Book Guy's rigorous standards of canonical accuracy and craft. He responds to the feeling in it, the energy, the fact that a child made something and meant it. Comic Book Guy reacts with a hurt that he cannot fully conceal behind the usual apparatus of contempt. His idol has not confirmed his verdict. His idol has, in fact, suggested that the verdict missed the point. That quality as Comic Book Guy measures it, through accuracy, through adherence to established standards, through technical correctness, is not the only measure available. That something can be imperfect and still matter. This is the episode where Comic Book Guy is most clearly revealed as a person in pain. Not dramatic pain, not the open wound of Moe or the suppressed explosion of Ned. Quiet pain. The pain of someone who built an entire value system around a specific definition of excellence and is confronted by the person whose opinion matters most to him with the possibility that the definition is incomplete. He does not update the definition. He goes back to the store. He keeps issuing verdicts. The show does not give him a transformation because a transformation would not be honest to who he is. What it gives him, across later seasons, is something smaller and more real. Glimpses of a life that exists beyond the store. Moments of genuine connection that his armor cannot quite keep out. Evidence that the person built the fortress is still in there and still capable of being reached. In Season 12, the episode Worst Episode Ever, which is named after his catchphrase, gives him his first real focal storyline. He has a heart attack. He is in the hospital. Bart and Milhouse run the store while he recovers. The episode treats his recovery not as an opportunity for jokes about his weight or his lifestyle, but as a genuine story about a person who has, in his complete devotion to the store and the things in it, neglected every other aspect of his existence. The heart attack is the body making a point the mind has been refusing to hear. He launches an online review site from his hospital bed. He cannot stop. The reviewing, the assessing, the positioning of himself as the authority, these are not hobbies he can put down while he recovers. They are the structure of his identity. Without them, there is just a man in a hospital bed in Kingfield, Maine, who is not sure who he is beyond the things he knows. In later seasons, the show becomes more interested in Comic Book Guy's loneliness and his attempts to address it. He develops relationships. He finds a woman named Kumiko, a manga artist, and marries her in Season 26. The marriage is portrayed as genuine. Two people who exist somewhat outside the social mainstream, finding each other and making something real. It is one of the most straightforwardly warm outcomes the show has given any supporting character, and it is given to Comic Book Guy, which is the show's way of saying something it does not say out loud. That the person behind the fortress is not unlovable. That the knowledge and the sarcasm and the withering assessments of other people's taste are a presentation, not a verdict on what is possible. The people who love Comic Book Guy most are people who know what it is to build expertise as a form of self-protection. They may not have done it with comic books. They may have done it with music, with film, with history, with science, with literature, with any domain of knowledge that offered a place to stand when the social world did not. The specific content of the expertise is less important than the function it served. They know the experience of learning things with a depth and intensity that most people around them did not match, and of finding that depth both satisfying and isolating. The more you know about something, the fewer people there are who can follow you into what you know. The expertise that was supposed to connect you to a community, The community of people who care about this thing as much as you do turns out to also create a distance from the much larger community of people who do not care about it at all. Comic book guy fans understand the contempt too, not because they are contemptuous people necessarily, but because they understand where it comes from. The contempt is the long shadow of caring too much. When you have invested enormously in something and you encounter someone treating that same thing carelessly, watching the movie once and forming loud opinions, buying the first comic in a series without knowing its history, claiming to love something they have barely touched, there is a real feeling that gets triggered. The feeling has contempt in it, but underneath the contempt is something closer to grief. Something that says, this thing that held me together, that I have studied and loved and made the center of my life, is being held lightly by someone who has no idea what it actually is. Comic Book Guy does not know how to say this. He says, worst episode ever instead. The Comic Book Guy fan has their own version of this, their own domain that they have gone too deep into to explain to most people, their own experience of caring about something in a way that the people around them found excessive or confusing or slightly embarrassing, their own version of the store, the space they have built around the thing that matters, where they are the authority, where the standards are theirs, where nobody can walk in and tell them their knowledge is wrong. There is a specific joy that Comic Book Guy fans tend to share with the character himself. The joy of being completely and absolutely correct about something in a domain where correctness is measurable. When Comic Book Guy tells a customer that the issue they are holding is from the third printing and therefore worth considerably less than they think, he is right. The facts are the facts. The knowledge is real. In a world where so much is subjective and contested and dependent on who you know and how you present yourself and what you were born with, there is a genuine satisfaction in occupying a space where expertise is verifiable, where the work you put in produces an outcome that can be pointed to. This is not arrogance at its root. It is the satisfaction of mastery. The problem is that mastery, deployed as a barrier, stops being satisfying eventually. The verdicts pile up. The worst episodes ever accumulate. The customers leave and the store empties, and the night comes and Comic Book Guy is alone with his comics and his knowledge and the specific quiet of a life that has been very full of things and not very full of people. The show catches him in this quiet, in small moments across many seasons. The line about loneliness and cheeseburgers being a dangerous mix, delivered from a hospital bed to a doctor with the same formal sentence structure he uses for everything, is one of the show's most precisely observed comedy moments. It is funny because it is true, and because he says it with such complete self-awareness, as though he is filing a report on his own condition rather than expressing a feeling. He knows what his life is. He has assessed it with the same rigor he applies to everything. The assessment is not flattering. He delivers it anyway, because accuracy matters more to him than comfort. The Comic Book Guy fan hears that line and recognizes the voice that turns feelings into observations, the voice that processes experience through analysis because analysis is safer than the raw feeling, the voice that knows, when it is being honest with itself, exactly what it has and exactly what it is missing, and has found a way to hold both pieces of information at the same time without the holding destroying it. The Harvard degree and the Klingon thesis and the store full of comics and the worst episode ever, all of it is the same thing. A person who found something worth knowing everything about and chose knowing everything about it over the riskier, less quantifiable project of letting people in. The letting in eventually happens. Kumiko happens. The marriage happens. The show allows it, carefully and without fanfare, because the show has always known that the person inside the fortress is not the fortress. The people who love Comic Book Guy most know this too. They know the fortress from the inside. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, the last character in this series is in some ways the most ordinary of all of them. No Harvard degree, no nuclear plant, no saxophone, no bar. He has a school, a mother he cannot leave, and a name that does not fully belong to him. He is a man who has given everything he has to an institution that has given him very little back, and who has spent his entire adult life being the person in charge of a place that has never once made him feel like he belongs there. Section 10. Principal Skinner, the man who became someone else's life. Seymour Skinner is the principal of Springfield Elementary School. He drives a sensible car. He wears the same style of suit in almost every appearance. He eats dinner with his mother Agnes every night at the house they share, the house he grew up in, the house he has never permanently left. He enforces rules with a dedication that occasionally crosses from professional responsibility into something closer to compulsion. He is afraid of Agnes in a way that the show depicts consistently and without much softening. He has worked at Springfield Elementary for his entire adult life and shows no realistic prospect of leaving. His real name is not Seymour Skinner. This is the fact that changes everything about him, and it is not a fan theory or an interpretation. It is a confirmed episode plot from Season 9, Episode 2, called The Principal and the Pauper. The episode reveals that the man everyone in Springfield knows as Principal Skinner is actually a person named Armin Tamzarian. The real Seymour Skinner was his commanding officer in Vietnam. Tamzarian was a troubled young man from a difficult background who looked up to Skinner as a mentor and father figure. When Skinner went missing and was presumed dead, Tamzarian went to Springfield to deliver the news to Skinner's mother Agnes. He stayed. He assumed the identity. He became Seymour Skinner so completely that he forgot for long stretches of time that he had ever been Armin Tamzarian at all. The real Seymour Skinner eventually reappears. He is alive. He comes back to Springfield and reclaims his name and his mother and his life. Tamzarian, exposed and humiliated, prepares to leave. The town decides in the end to let him stay as Skinner, because the man they know is the man they know, and the name on the birth certificate of a stranger does not change that. A judge legally orders everyone to never speak of the matter again, under penalty of torture. The episode is played mostly for comedy, and it is one of the most controversial episodes the show ever produced. Longtime fans found the revelation disrespectful to a character they had grown to care about. The writers were divided on it. It has been discussed and debated in Simpsons fan communities for decades. What tends to get lost in that debate is what the revelation actually says about Skinner as a person. Armin Tamzarian was nobody. He had no family that functioned, no path that was clearly laid out, no version of the future that seemed stable or achievable. He found a mentor in the army. He found, in Seymour Skinner's identity, a version of a life that had structure and purpose and a mother who expected things and a school that needed running. He stepped into that life the way a person steps into a warm coat left behind by someone else. It fit well enough. He kept it on. He kept it on for so long that taking it off became unthinkable. This is the psychological core of Principal Skinner, and it explains things about him that his surface presentation does not. The rigidity, the rule following, the inability to let things go or bend or adapt. A person who is living inside a borrowed identity cannot afford to be flexible, because flexibility requires a stable foundation to flex from. If you do not fully know who you are beneath the role, you hold the role tighter. You become the job, the title, the function, because the job and the title and the function are the only parts of the structure you can fully trust. Agnes Skinner, his mother, or rather, the mother of the man whose identity he borrowed, is one of the show's most consistent sources of dark comedy and genuine discomfort. She is critical, demanding, controlling, and cruel in small, precise ways that the show depicts with unflinching accuracy. She calls him names. She dismisses his achievements. She manages him the way a person manages a disappointment they have decided to keep around for company. Skinner absorbs this. He does not fight back. He does not leave. He comes home every night and sits at the dinner table and takes whatever Agnes has prepared to say, and the next morning he puts on the suit and drives to the school. The show has a specific episode, Bart's Dog Gets an F, from early in the run, and many subsequent episodes that return to the Agnes dynamic repeatedly because it is one of the most reliable sources of a specific kind of comedy. The comedy of a fully grown adult professional being completely undone by a small, elderly, deeply unpleasant woman. The audience laughs. The audience also winces, because the picture of a person who cannot leave the situation that diminishes them, who has been in it so long that leaving now would require dismantling the entire structure of their daily life, is not purely funny. It is recognizable. Skinner became a principal because he went to Vietnam, because he met a man named Seymour Skinner, because that man went missing, because Tamzarian needed somewhere to be. He did not choose education as a calling. He fell into an identity and built a career inside it, and has been maintaining both ever since, with the specific energy of a person who knows, somewhere, that the ground is not as solid as it looks. The show gives him genuine competence at the job despite all of this. Skinner runs the school. He does it with more care than the school's resources deserve. He worries about the children, about the budget, about Mrs. Krabappel's attendance record, about groundskeeper Willie's increasingly alarming behavior. He is present at the school before anyone else arrives, and often still there when everyone has left. The job is real to him, even if the name is not. The function is solid, even if the foundation is borrowed. There is an episode from Season 5 called Sweet Seymour Skinner's Badass Song, which is among the finest Skinner episodes the show has produced. He is fired from Springfield Elementary after Santa's little helper gets loose in the school ventilation system and disrupts the building. The dismissal is swift and total. He packs his things and he leaves, and the school continues without him, because institutions always continue without the person who just left them. What the episode shows in the days after his firing is what makes it worth remembering. Skinner does not know what to do with himself. He has no hobby that sustains him. He has no identity that functions outside the school. He wanders. He goes home to Agnes. He re-enlists in the army briefly. He is lost in a way that is not dramatic but is completely visible. The specific lostness of a person whose entire sense of self was housed in a building they no longer have access to. Bart, who has spent years as Skinner's primary antagonist, notices. Bart misses him. This is one of the show's quieter admissions, that the structure Skinner provided, even when it was oppressive and rule-bound and frustrating, was something Bart needed. The relationship between them is adversarial by design, but also genuinely reciprocal. Skinner needs a Bart to manage. Bart needs a Skinner to push against. When Skinner is gone, the school gets a new principal who is worse, and Bart works to get Skinner reinstated, and the old order returns, and both of them settle back into the dance they have been doing for years. The people who love Principal Skinner most tend to be people who understand the trap of institutional identity, the way a job or a role can become so central to who a person is that the person and the job stop being separable. They recognize the borrowed coat. Not necessarily a borrowed name, not a Vietnam story, but the more common version. The person who became who they are because circumstances set them on a particular path and they followed it faithfully and have been following it so long that turning around and asking whether this is actually who they wanted to be feels less like self-examination and more like opening a door in a house they have lived in for 20 years and finding a room they did not know was there. Skinner fans tend to appreciate rules more than Bart fans do. They understand why structures exist. They have probably been the person who maintained a structure at some point, in a team, in a family, in a workplace, not because the structure was perfect, but because without it, things fell apart and someone had to be the one who kept it standing. They know the quiet exhaustion of being that person. They know the specific indignity of being that person and receiving not gratitude, but resistance. Not recognition, but a permanent record of every time the structure failed. They also tend to have a dark appreciation for the comedy of being trapped. Not trapped dramatically, not trapped in a way that produces a story worth telling. Trapped in the ordinary way, in the life that built up around you while you were busy maintaining it, in the mother's house, and the borrowed name, and the sensible car, and the suit, and the same hallways every morning. Skinner keeps walking those hallways. He does not like all of it. He does not choose all of it. He does it because he is Seymour Skinner, principal of Springfield Elementary, and that is who he decided to be on a day a long time ago that he may not even fully remember anymore. Now, after 10 characters and 10 mirrors, something larger has come into focus. The show did not build these people to be funny, though they are funny. It built them to be true. And the reason a person has a favorite among them, the reason something in the viewing experience reached through the screen and said, "This one, this is the one that means something," is not random. The conclusion this series has been building toward across all 10 of these portraits is the thing worth saying last. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.